This is a Florida pond. It's not your typical snorkel destination for 3 reasons. 1, because, well, it looks like this. 2, there's a few alligators out here. And 3, well, people are worried about brain-eating amoebas. But it's where we're going to be snorkeling tonight. If you remember from last time, I'd said that if the video gets over 100,000 views, I'd film it again at night. Well, the time has finally come. Brain-eating amoebas, or Nigluria fowleri, are an amoeboflagellate. Now, they primarily eat bacteria, but in the perfect scenario, when forced up your nose, they can start to eat away your olfactory neuron, where they make your way to your brain, and you can get brain swelling and die. They typically live in the substrate of warm, still bodies of water, not unlike a Florida pond. But I have earplugs and a tub of Vaseline. So technically, if I'm able to stop them from reaching my olfactory neuron, then I should be good. Now, there's a few things we learned from last time. One is that silicone, which I used last time, is apparently kind of toxic, not good for your skin. So some people recommended I use Vaseline. It's not going to get sticky and dry like the other stuff, but we'll see. So anyway, here's the Vaseline. I'm going in. I really didn't think I'd be doing this again when I did this last time, but here we are. Still one of the weirdest things I've ever done. Just got to get a perfect seal. How's that look? Also, if you're watching this on release night, happy Halloween. Now, a lot of people in the comments were saying, what about your ears or your mouth? Now, remember, it's a super already crazy scenario if you get a brain-eating amoeba, but it really has to go up your nose. And yes, the nose is connected to the throat, but it's already rare enough for it to get forced up your nose far enough. So the fact that it's going to go in your throat, then travel up to your nasal passages, and then back up to your olfactory neuron, extra unlikely. And also, if you've ever used a basket snorkel, you still sometimes get water in your nose, even though the snorkel covers your face. I found the last time I did not get any water in my nose. So if there's a place that's like known to be loaded with them, I wouldn't recommend like trusting this, but technically it should work. I got a perfect seal right now. It's a lot of Vaseline on my face, but that's pretty good. Now I got to go find Kevin. Kevin? Man, where'd he go? Oh, there you are.
Eastern screech owl. Oh, nice. What is on your face?
Vaseline.
Oh, we're doing this again?
Afraid so. All right, it is time to suit up. Still have silicone left in my mask from last time. I'm realizing the Vaseline is not quite as structurally sound as the silicone, but it is safer for my skin. Mask is going on. Once it's on, I'm stuck until the end of the video. So here we go. Also, of course, mandatory defogging.
Bat.
A bat?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Little 3-footer. Before we get out there, explore it underwater, I'm gonna set my camera up for a time lapse, and we're gonna grab it on the way back in, and it'll show up later in the video if it's any good. It should be good. It's a crystal clear night. The Milky Way is like right over there, so that's gotta be good. It's pretty crazy down there. Gonna do a quick temperature check. Brain-eating amoebas prefer warm water environments, so a lot of people associate them just with still water, and especially ponds that might look like this, have a ton of vegetation in them. However, they normally prefer really warm environments. Typically between 80 degrees Fahrenheit to 115 degrees Fahrenheit is when they really can proliferate. So one of the most dangerous environments to stick your head underwater in tends to be hot springs, just because of how prevalent they can be. So right now it looks like water temp is about 80 degrees. Still pretty warm. But things are cooling off now that it's October. I didn't really want to do this in peak summer just because that's a little bit more risk. But again, Nigleria fowleri is a very common species of amoeboflagellate. It's much more common in water bodies than people tend to think. However, it's just very rare to contract it. And normally to do so, you need to be actively storing the substrate of a aquatic environment, which I have no plans to do. Also, my nose is blocked off, so we should be good to go. I will say this is definitely going to be one of the spookier dives that I have done. So I'm going to be sticking close to the canoe. Kevin's going to be keeping an eye out. But yeah, we'll get in, see what we can find. So here goes nothing. Sorry about rocking the boat, Kevin.
All good.
All right. It's pretty thick in here. There we go. As my head dipped below the surface, I took a quick look around and then left behind the comfort of the canoe as I dove down towards the bottom of the pond. It was obviously dark down there, but I could feel the presence of objects all around me as my dive lights illuminated a bizarre aquatic forest. Feathery plants brushed against my shoulders, and long, thin stalks lined a maze of wandering underwater passageways. I was hyper aware of how easy it would be to get lost down here, and felt only a little relief knowing the surface wasn't too far away, as long as I remembered which way was up. Twisting tendrils and stems wrapped around me as I struggled forward. It was sensory overload as I tried to navigate what felt like an impenetrable aquatic wilderness.
Wilson snipe. Hear that?
Slowly but surely, as I bobbed and weaved through the stalks and stems and pads, I was able to make my way into small pockets of open water. Now that I could move more freely, I could appreciate what was around me. I was shocked by the colors of the aquatic vegetation. Brilliant reds and lime greens reflected back at me in stark contrast to the dark water of the pond. I was especially impressed by the variety of submerged lily pads. They are huge pads the size of dinner plates, with large veins radiating out from the center. There were also smaller lily pads as well, all competing as they slowly battled their way to the surface in this crowded underwater canopy. There were also some old decaying lily pads, and these looked pretty ominous in the dark, I'm not gonna lie. As I looked back up at the surface, I pretty much just got whacked over the head with an insane kaleidoscope of natural geometry and color, and I felt that good old feeling of fear changing into something else. The tight environment meant I was occasionally kicking up a lot of substrate. I was jolted back to the reality of brain-eating amoebas, and believe it or not, I actually felt gratitude for 2 nose holes stuffed full with foam and Vaseline.
There's still one trick these brain-eating amoebas don't like. That's if I stay on the boat.
As I continued wandering through the pond, I came across more of the feathery plant I had seen earlier. At first, there were just a few shoots jutting up from the bottom in the dark, but steadily they grew thicker and thicker and thicker. Eventually, it felt like everywhere I turned was another cumulonimbus-style cloud of this stuff, blocking my path and vaguely threatening to swallow me. It got so dense that in some areas it formed a literal wall, stretching from the bottom of the pond to the surface. This plant is bladderwort. I believe I was seeing both yellow and purple bladderwort. Bladderwort is an aquatic carnivorous plant. All along its feathery branches are small bladders. Specialized cells pump water out of the bladder, creating and holding a pressure difference, kind of like a vacuum time bomb. When a tiny organism like a mosquito larva gets close to the sensitive hair-like structures at the bladder's trapdoor, water is sucked into the bladder in an instant, pulling in the unsuspecting prey, which is then digested. Since these plants are aquatic and carnivorous, they don't have actual roots, but instead have specialized stems that anchor them to the bottom of their aquatic environment. I eventually noticed a few little blooms forming along some isolated strands of bladderwort. It was impressive how far some of them stretched up to the surface. I was lucky enough to find a single bloom that had opened up just above the waterline. It's a beautiful flower, but it's pretty crazy that linked to this tiny purple bloom is a vast network of one pretty hardcore carnivorous plant. It was also crazy to think that I was actually swimming through underwater storm clouds of carnivorous plant, although it was also nerve-wracking to think of what might be hiding out in the dense mats of vegetation that was the carnivorous plant. But thankfully, Kevin was locked in and keeping a careful watch over me from the canoe.
During this time of year, the fall and the spring, migration is ongoing, and if you listen closely, overhead, throughout the night, especially early morning and early evening, you can hear nocturnal flight calls. There's a whole host of birds flying over right now. Thrushes, warblers, orioles. Many are migrating at night to avoid day-and-old raptors, and they give contact calls.
What did you say? Yeah, okay.
Okay, I should go look for alligators.
Pressed onward. And yes, I initially forgot to take my headlamp off. This was not intentional, but oh well, too late now. I directed my focus back to the water lilies. The vertical lattice created by their crisscrossed stalks was mesmerizing, and I spotted a few buds in the midst of them. These are American white water lilies, and when these buds reach the surface, they will erupt into a sweet-smelling white flower. But I also noticed something strange. A few stalks formed a corkscrew, like a tightly wound spring with a large bud on the end. Although it might just look like the beginnings of yet another bloom climbing its way up to the surface, these spirals are actually the water lily pulling the blooms back down underwater. After the flower has been pollinated, the stalks curl and the bloom closes up as it sinks below the surface. The plant does this in order to protect the pollinated flower and allow the fruit to safely develop beneath the water. Although I hadn't seen much underwater wildlife yet, the plants were proving to be pretty rad, and all of this water lily action was happening just immediately below the canoe. A familiar gleam of eyeshine caught the light of our flashlights, and Kevin and I headed into the shallows after it. I approached carefully and gently lowered my camera into the water. Engulfed in a cloud of bladderwort was an alligator. I could just see its eye and the gnarled scales of its head. It paused briefly, then gracefully pulled back and vanished without a trace into the vegetation. I found one other smaller alligator, but it too disappeared into the green. I wanted to try one more time to find more wildlife in the deeper areas of the pond, so Kevin and I paddled out once more. As I started looking more closely at the confusing aquatic realm in the pond, I began to notice life where I hadn't seen it before. Sunfish hid in the bladderwort, kind of like birds resting in a rainforest canopy. Honestly, if it wasn't for the reflection of my flashlight off their fishy scales, I don't think I would have seen any of them. As quickly as I would see them, however, they would instantly vanish into the dark maze of the pond. You don't always appreciate the beauty of simple life forms like this tiny mosquito fish when there's lots of animals to look at underwater. But as hard as it was to find fish, let alone swim around in the pond, this tiny guy got to be the star of the show. I noticed a weirdly shaped fish resting in the substrate at the bottom of the pond. But as I dove down for a closer look, with a flick of its tail, it disappeared in a cloud of silt before I could get a good ID on it.
But then I stumbled across another one, and I got a great look, good enough to see that this was a lake chubsucker. For real, who is naming these fish? He was cool though, but he also darted away into the dark. As I pushed deeper, my mind began to wander. Snorkeling through the forbidden aquatic world of the pond was pushing me to my limit. What was lurking in the dark, just beyond the reach of my dive lights, or even behind me? What microscopic threats lived in the swirling substrate kicked up by my fins? But while it was clear I was in a place I didn't really belong, there was still so much calm and beauty surrounding me. But as I sank down beneath the lily pads and they closed overhead, I saw something actually frightening. I saw myself in a hard world of endless, boring pavement. It was slowly engulfing all green in its insatiable vacuole. It told a lie of progress, all while masking the steady decay of our ability to value something beyond the imaginary revenue it generates. I was told that this world was built for me, but I was lost here too, and I was not safe. It's often that these kinds of habitats are the ones that get subject to development and destruction. Because who cares if we pave over and develop a warm pond full of brain-eating amoebas and alligators? At least, that's what some powerful people would like you to think, especially here in Florida. But I find that the more time I spend in wild places like this pond, the more my brain shifts from feeling fear to a sense of wonder. This place is teeming with life, both above and below the surface, during the day and night. And even if I don't actually live in the pond, it is still, in a way, my home. And I want to protect it, brain-eating amoebas and all.
Oh man. Well, can't confirm. That is pretty spooky out there. Also, swimming through the lily pads, it's like a million octopus tentacles trying to drag me down. Oh. Are you ready?
Ready.
Well, Kevin, what do you think? You think the brain-eating amoebas hate your strategy of just staying in the boat or my strategy of pulling up my nose?
Probably staying on the boat.
That's
Good thing you got your nose plugged up though.
yeah. I mean, that's how much stuff I was stirred up in there. I was glad for it, but I will say, maybe they get like really frustrated when they're like, "Oh, a free nose down there," you know, and they try it and they're like, "Oh, gross! It's full of Vaseline." I think that would make them really bad.
They're probably super annoyed right now.
Yeah. That about does it for tonight. Not a ton of wildlife out there, but I mean, there is a ton, but it's just hard to find in how dense an environment that is to navigate. But creepy, but man, still beautiful. What a world. Not one that is meant for humans, that's for sure, but still really, really cool and definitely worth protecting. So, all right, I'm gonna start the paddle back. If you're wondering why the time lapse fades out at the end, that's why. It is quite foggy and dewy out here. And my camera is quite covered in little tiny water droplets. But we got something. That was a good night. Pretty cool to explore a not so commonly explored environment, but now for the grand reveal. All right, before I pull the mask off, I definitely think silicone was more structurally sound. It also is nice because it pulls off in like one chunk instead of just smeared Vaseline everywhere. These held up pretty good. So even though there are probably some braiding reviews out there, I wasn't very worried about getty. I was kicking up so much stuff just to try to navigate through all the lily pads and everything. I was glad that my nose was plugged. So anyways, without further ado, here we go. Oh gosh. Is that, I don't know if that's snot. That's definitely snot. Did that shoot anywhere?
Yeah.
Here we got one. Where's the other? Can't leave it here. There it is. There you go. You don't need to see that. Anyway, Vaseline's a little messier, better for your skin. There you have it, folks. There's the inside of the mask. It's pretty loaded with Vaseline. Can clean that out when I get home. Definitely not your typical snorkeling environment for good reason, but still a really important and beautiful ecosystem in its own way. But anyways, thank you guys for coming on this little nighttime adventure. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, I will see you next time.